Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
In the Ojibwe language, a stone can be a someone. The grammar treats it as alive, the same way it treats a person, or an animal, or a spirit. In the 1940s, an American anthropologist named Irving Hallowell, living among the Barrens River Ojibwe in the forests of central Canada, kept running into this, and one day he decided to just ask. He found an old man, and he put the question to him plainly: "Are all the stones around us alive?" The old man did not answer right away. He thought about it for a long while, and then he said, "No, but some are." That short reply is one of the quietly important sentences in the history of anthropology, and it is where we have to start, because behind it sits one of the oldest and most common ways human beings have ever lived in the world, and for about 100 years it has been buried under a single misleading word. The word is animism. Say that word out loud and most people picture something a little silly. Simple folk who think everything has a soul, who bow to rocks and trees because they cannot quite tell what is alive from what is dead. Religion's charming first draft, a child's mistake. That picture is wrong, and the old man's answer is why. He did not say all stones are alive, he said some are. Which ones? You find that out by paying attention, the same slow way you find out whether a stranger might turn into a friend. The clearest way anyone has put it comes from a religious studies scholar named Graham Harvey, who has spent years on this. Animists, he writes, are people who recognize that the world is full of persons, only some of whom are human. Hold on to that phrase for a second. A world full of persons. Harvey does not mean little souls hidden away inside objects. He means persons in the plain sense, beings you can deal with and wrong, who in their own way can answer you back. A river can be one of them, and so can a mountain or a bear or the wind. The man who turned this way of living into a quaint error was the same man who named it, and he did not mean it kindly. In 1871, an English anthropologist named Edward Tylor published a book called Primitive Culture. In it, he tried to define religion in the simplest possible way. Religion, he said, is the belief in spiritual beings, and the underlying belief in souls and spirits he gave a name: animism, from the Latin word anima, meaning breath or soul. Tylor thought he had found religion's first clumsy attempt. His story went like this. Long ago, early people puzzled over strange things, like dreams where you wander far from your sleeping body, or the terrible stillness of a corpse. To explain all that, Tylor said, they invented the soul, a kind of second self that could slip free of the body and travel on its own. And once they had that idea, they read it into everything around them, into animals and rivers and the sun. Religion grew up from there, climbing from many gods to one god, and one day, Tylor was sure, it would dissolve into science. The spirit beliefs still hanging on among the peoples he rudely called the lower races, those were just leftovers, old mistakes that had not died out yet. For about 100 years, that was the standard view. Animism was the childhood of the human mind, something the species was supposed to grow out of. The people Tylor wrote off as confused turned out to be doing something that made a great deal of sense, and by the end of the 20th century, anthropology had quietly turned his whole verdict upside down. It helps to slow down on what these traditions actually treat as a person. The circle is far wider than a modern Westerner would ever draw it. The Chewang people of Malaysia, studied by an anthropologist named Signa Howell, grant a soul to all sorts of beings, and at one point they extended that soul to the Japanese warplanes flying over them during the war. Some Siberian peoples hold that a single human being carries several souls at once, each one with a different job to do. And there is a useful distinction here, drawn by a scholar named Robert Merritt not long after Tylor. Feeling a vague power running loose through the world, the way the Polynesian idea of mana works, is one thing. Meeting an actual person is something else. Animism is about the second one. To an animist, the river is a someone rather than a thing with force inside it, and you deal with it the way you would deal with anyone who can take offense. And that points to the part that trips people up, especially anyone raised on a religion with rules and creeds. Animism is mostly a set of things you do more than a set of things you believe. It lives in how you behave, in how you treat the persons around you. You couldn't really write it down on a card. An anthropologist named Nurit Bird-David put it beautifully in 1999. You come to know this kind of world, she said, by living with it, not by standing back and studying it from outside. You learn the forest by being a part of it. The clearest place to watch that work is hunting. Across the far north and across the Amazon, a hunter has a relationship with the animal he takes. The animal gives itself to a hunter who has behaved well, and it hides from one who is greedy or careless. Some Siberian peoples talk about the animal spirits as master parents who hand the creature over. Customs and taboos keep the whole bargain honest. Among some Yupik communities, after a death, people stay away from the shoreline for a while so as not to trouble the eyes of the sea. The forest, in other words, is a society, and you live inside it the way you live inside any society, with manners, with debts, with the steady knowledge that the others are watching.
The reversal started with Hallowell, the man with the stones. Out of his time with the Ojibwe, he coined a phrase that stuck: other than human persons. In that world, the category of person was simply bigger than the category of human. Bird-David's paper in 1999 put the idea back on respectable footing, and in 2005, Graham Harvey wrote the book that became the field's handbook. But two thinkers carried it furthest, and they're worth knowing. The first is a French anthropologist named Philippe Descola, who took over Claude Lévi-Strauss's old chair at the Collège de France. In a 2005 book, Descola argued that there are really only 4 basic ways human beings have ever sorted out the world, and ours is just one of them. In the animist way, all beings share an inner life, a kind of soul, but they wear different bodies. People, jaguars, and rivers, all of them persons in different skins. Our modern Western way runs the other direction. We all share one physical world, but we hand out an inner life to humans alone. And the uncomfortable part of Descola's map is where it leaves us. The modern West is not the normal, neutral view that everyone else strays from. It comes out as one option among 4, and a fairly recent and unusual one at that. The second thinker pushed even harder. He is a Brazilian anthropologist named Eduardo Viveiros de Castro, and from his work in the Amazon, he drew an idea he called perspectivism. In many of the stories he studied, the animals see themselves as people. The jaguar experiences its own den as a house, and its own blood is a warm mug of beer. What separates the jaguar from a human being is not its mind, it is its body. Viveiros de Castro gave that a name: multinaturalism. Everyone shares one way of being a person, but each kind of creature looks out from a different kind of body and so lives, in a real sense, in a different world. None of this lives safely in the past or in a textbook. A great deal of what we have covered on this site rests on exactly this ground. When the Evenki of Siberia treat every river and every mountain as a spirit you have to bargain with, that is animism in action. And when a Malay charm assumes that a person carries a soul substance that can be reached and harmed, that is the old animist belief still working underneath Islam. The living traditions are not hard to find. In Japan, Shinto still speaks to the kami, the persons who live in a waterfall or an old tree or a single stone. Many Aboriginal Australian peoples hold the land itself to be alive and aware, a country that knows who walks across it. These are very different worlds, and none of them would thank an outsider for lumping them together, though the family resemblance is hard to miss. One warning has to travel with all of this. Animism is not a single religion, and it never was. Tylor built the word to look down on the very people he was describing, and even the friendlier modern version of it is still a tool that Western scholars use, not a faith that anyone actually follows. It throws 1,000 very different ways of living into a single box, and most of those ways already have their own names. The scholars who brought the word back in the 1990s kept it for a reason. Some of the communities it described had started using it about themselves, turning an old insult into something closer to a banner. So the word is worth keeping. Just remember that it hides about as much as it shows. An argument from 1871 has reopened, and the stakes turn out to be far larger than a question about rocks. A world made of persons asks something of you. If the river is a someone, then you owe it good behavior, and you cannot simply use it up the way you can use up a pile of gravel. Descola, along with a philosopher named David Abram, has argued that the modern world drained the persons out of nature on purpose. We emptied the life out of it until only dead matter was left. And dead matter, of course, is very easy to use up without feeling bad about it. A way of seeing the world that almost every human culture has lived by and that ours set aside is suddenly getting a second look. The question now is no longer how people could ever have been so foolish, but what we lost when we stopped. So go back one last time to the old man and his stones. He was not confused about geology. He was not telling Hallowell that pebbles have feelings. He was saying something sharper and much harder to hold on to. In his world, being a person is not a fence drawn neatly around the human race. It can reach out here and there to a stone, a bear, the wind. Most stones, he knew perfectly well, are only stones, but you stay awake because a few of them are not, and the only way to ever find out is to live as though the world might be looking back at you. You do not have to believe him, but it is worth remembering that for most of human history, in most places on Earth, his answer was the obvious one. Ours is the experiment. If you enjoyed this, the full article is on the site at crazyalchemist.com with the bibliography and the source documents listed for anyone who wants to read further. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts for more on the history of esotericism and the dark corners of belief. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.